important. 2 years ago, in order to announce the illegal actions, that was after the 15th of July, there was an association that was set up, and there is a museum where the items of the people who were killed after the coup attempt are being exhibited. And we created a Tenkil. This is the name of the association. This is a memory association. So there is a database that contains more than 400 items. So it shows the names of people who were tortured. So when there is going to be a legal case in future, this has created an important database for us regarding the documentation of torture and violations of rights. So also we have people who have been monitoring the Turkish tribunal, and I know that they have been watching this tribunal, and they are the perpetrators of these illegal actions. And I would like to tell them that our struggle will continue until the perpetrators of these crimes are punished. And I also want to mention what happened to my husband. So I last mentioned that his glasses were broken. So I know this from the documents in the prosecutor's files, and I also know it from the testimonies of people who were at the same time under detention with my husband, who were later on released. For 13 days, my husband was systematically tortured. They always called him to receive his testimony. He was beaten, he was systematically tortured, and he was brought back to the custodial prison. So during one of those interrogations, they again took away my husband in order to interrogate him. One of the police officers started to beat my husband, saying, "Why are you looking me in the face?" Then my husband started to look down, and then he started to beat him, saying, "Why are you looking down?" And then he called him a traitor of the country, and they beat my husband along with the other policemen. Then his glasses were broken, and they stepped on his back with their feet. And whenever he came back to the custodial prison, he was devastated. He was in a very bad condition. He showed his ribs. He was holding the place, his heart, his chest. So there are actually ecchymosis. There are broken ribs on his rib cage, so there is medical evidence of this. I learned that my husband continuously had diabetes episodes. He had panic attacks during these diabetes-related episodes and panic attacks. He was taken to hospital. He was treated. Once he was kept under monitoring follow-up at the hospital for 4 hours, but the doctors told that he could go back to the custodial prison once again. And there was a police officer who called us, who told us that we should go to the forensic department. Immediately, we went to the forensic department, and that's where I learned that my husband passed away. And my husband was fully healthy when he went to the custodial prison, but his corpse was delivered to us. So after I went to the forensic department, after I learned about the passing away of my husband, they didn't even let us mourn. They didn't even let us go through this mourning period. We had to tackle other problems. Unfortunately, they said they wouldn't give his mortal remains to us for burial. They told us they would bury him in the cemetery of the traitors in Istanbul. But of course, I objected to this. I told them that his testimony was not heard. You cannot proclaim him as a traitor. He is not a criminal. You cannot bury him in the cemetery of the traitors. We once again went to the anti-terrorism department in Istanbul. We went to the prosecutor's office, but they didn't accept it. And finally, I gave up, so I decided to take the mortal remains to Konya, which is my home city. And then I went back to Istanbul, the anti-terrorism department of the police station in Istanbul, in order to take away all his belongings. And I saw that none of his diabetes medication was provided for him. All the medications were there unused. Of course, I made a complaint. I applied to the prosecutor's office saying that this was a crime. And even though everything was very clear in the post-mortem reports, we had the post-mortem report available to us, everything was clear, but the prosecutor closed the case in December 2016, and we saw that there was hyperemia, there was ecchymosis, there was rib cage fractures, he had hemorrhage. And also there was a lawyer who was at the same time in the custodial prison along with my husband, and he said he wanted to testify if there is an ongoing legal case. There were also 15 other people who witnessed this crime, He said that my husband was beaten to death, but unfortunately this was also not taken into account, and the prosecutor decided to close the case, saying that there is no need for investigation. Then we went to the Turkey Human Rights Association, which is an independent NGO, and we talked to Şebnem Korufincancı from this association. She gave us an additional postmortem report. In this postmortem report, you could see my husband experienced panic attacks, flashbacks, rib fractures, and looking at all the symptoms in the postmortem report, even though the reason for that was heart attack, this heart attack was triggered by torture, and that was the report that we obtained from the Human Rights Association. And we also added this report to our uh, to our objection, and our objection was again accepted in January. I'm sorry, she says. We objected to this in January, and in July 2020, our objection was approved, but unfortunately, no progress was made. And then we in 9th of January 2020, this was again rejected. We said that the evidence was not examined, the footage from the Cathedral prison wasn't checked, and the second postmortem report wasn't examined. So we objected to this decision again, but in 18th of February 2020, they decided to absolutely reject our objection without a recourse for another objection. So the people who caused this torture have benefited from impunity. So we also made an application to the Constitutional Court about this impunity, but the case is still being seen. We haven't been able to make any progress. In February 2018, my husband was suspended from his job, and he was actually returned to his job as a public servant, and I said that this was proof that my husband was innocent, and this was actually heard in the public opinion in the press. And then, contrary to the common practice, the prosecutor's office had made a proclamation that my husband was not found innocent. So after that, a journalist wrote an article showing me and my son as targets, and then the prosecutor who had my husband under custody wrote an indictment about me. And this indictment should normally not be shared with the public opinion before it was accepted in the trial. So on the 6th of March, this indictment was written. On the 7th of March, it was leaked to the press. And then I learned from the press that there would be a case against me with a sentence of up to 15 years. And then on the 14th of March, the aggravated felony court accepted this application, and a trial was initiated against me. So the prosecutor who took my husband under custody also detained me, and no questions about me were asked. And they asked me to give testimonies which my husband didn't give. They tried to make me give names which they couldn't obtain from my husband. They said they would arrest me. They told me, you are living with your parents, therefore I release you. This is how I was released. So this prosecutor who detained my husband is Can Tuncay, and he allowed this torture. The person who allowed this torture to happen is Kayhan Ay, who is the supervisor of the branch of the anti-terrorism branch of the police department. So about 2 years after that, there was another incident where their names resurfaced. According to a news article by journalist Ahmet Dönmez on the 22nd of November 2018, this was published in the news. There was another math teacher who was detained, and he said the exact same words. He said, in the room there was Kayhan Ay and Can Tuncay. Kayhan Ay was torturing me, and I told him, I am a diabetes patient, please don't do this to me. Then he told him, do you remember the teacher who was a diabetic and he died? You will also end up like him. For 30 days, you are going to be subjected to my mercy. So he was subjected to psychological torture, and Can Tuncay was laughing next to him. And this teacher that he was talking about was Gökhan Açıkkollu, my husband. So these people enjoy impunity, and they still unfortunately continue to torture and prosecute people. This has to end somewhere. Therefore, we will continue our struggle to obtain our rights. That's all I would like to tell you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Hachikoilu, for your courageous testimony in front of this tribunal. And you help a lot that silence will be over in this kind of situation. And that's what we're trying to do here. So thank you very much for your testimony, and very best wish to you. So now I will go to the second witness for this afternoon, but it will a little bit change. First of all, it will be Mr. Barbaros Şansal. On l'a fait tout à l'heure. We did it before.
Pas sur ce qu'elle a dit maintenant.
Ah,
les questions.
Ok, mais alors on va plus. Ok, I'm sorry. So,
Elle a disparu maintenant.
ça on n'avait pas décidé. Ok, we will go to your testimony now, Barbaros Şansal, and you will speak first because you have a plane. You have to catch a plane. Okay, so you have the floor now.
Dear President, dear judges, I will start to welcome our guests in English, but I like to make my testimony on Turkish and translation, just because I wanted to give the expression and the feelings of the body language and mimes as well. It's kind of a little story of Turkey. I'm not going backwards to 80s, which I have been sent to exile for 9 years after the military coup, but I'm going to take your attention right after the 2000s. İlk olarak bana karşı
So first of all, there were sanctions and attacks against me. They started in 2006 after a TV show that I was doing for Habertürk TV station. As a result of this TV show that I was producing, the upper boards of radio and television of Turkey, Rütük, said that I was trying to reflect homosexuality as if it's a legitimate situation. Therefore, they banned me from appearing on TV for 2 years. Actually, I'm a tailor of women's clothes. I'm also a teacher. I'm an actor. I'm a writer and a columnist at the same time. Then, on 28 December 2012, in Istanbul, downtown Istanbul, on İnönü Street, New Zealand consulate, and in front of the regional machinery chemistry industry building, I was subjected to organized violence. Please show the next image. So 9 years ago, this attack happened, as you can see on the image, and none of the perpetrators were caught. After that, as you all know, Gezi Park protests started, and my workshop and my house are very close to the park. So it was, I was one of the first 3 or 4 people who entered the park. On the 2nd of August 2013, 5 people who said they were members of the intelligence agency, they took me away to a quarry outside of Istanbul. But the Istanbul police station said I was making up these crimes, and they decided to sue me. But at the court, I proved that this wasn't a false accusation, that I was correct. And also on the New Year's Eve, just before 2017, I pointed out to the time zone difference in Cyprus between the Turkish and Greek sides, and I was also charged with blasphemy, and I also pointed out to radical Islam and pedophilia. So I shared such a sarcastic video just on the New Year's Eve. And as you know, that year there was a massacre in the Reina nightclub. That was a coincidental thing. But this had nothing to me. But on the 1st of January in 2017, the pro-government media started a campaign against me. And as a result of this campaign, in the North Cyprus, I was in the North Cyprus, which is the Turkish part, there decisions against me, and Alexander Atalides, who is the reporter at the European Union, reported on this for the first time, and the United Kingdom also reported on this for the first time. All my personal belongings, my wallet, my phone were seized when I was in the north of Cyprus. And with my own flight ticket, I was abducted to Istanbul Atatürk Airport. And in the Atatürk Airport, on the night of the 2nd January 2017, 9 police officers and 13 official airport employees tried to lynch me at the airport's runway. And I was also subjected to a lynch, even though no measures were taken, and I was arrested based on the Article 217 of the Turkish Penal Code, and I was put in the Silivri in a prison, and the number was C72 of the cell. I couldn't benefit from any healthcare or hygienic provisions, and also, within 30 days, I should have been taken to court according to the constitutional provisions, but I was kept in detention for 56 days, so this was a violation of this period. But Istanbul Governor's office did not allow the investigation of the police officers who were supposed to protect me. So the former articles 141, 142, and the new name is Turkish Penal Code 301, which means that you openly condemn the Turkish state. And also, these articles are actually problematic in Turkey's EU negotiation process. So, based on this article, I was subjected to 6 days in prison. Then I was released, and I was banned from traveling abroad. I also wasn't allowed to recourse to a higher court. But after my travel ban was lifted, I contacted LGBT, human rights, environment, and animal rights struggle on the international arena. I was perseverant. For 1.5 years, I resided in Belgium, and now I'm currently residing in the island of Cyprus, and I still continue my struggle because concrete evidence is very close to my heart. I would like to show you the French translation of the court decisions of the Turkish court regarding my trial, and I would like to submit these to the esteemed members of this judicial panel. When you read this, you will see it's really comical. There are 58 court cases against me, and they generally are based on the allegations that I denigrated the government of Turkey, the people of Turkey, some parts of the inhabitants of Turkey based on their beliefs, some of them based on the region where they live, some of them based on physical traits. So the newly established hidden witness complaint system has been established by the presidency. So this is the basis of the allegations or accusations against me. So I go to my country, I attend court cases. So I also was subjected to 3 months, 22 days based on the Turkish Penal Code, and it wouldn't be postponed. And because I used the term seam or stitch, which is a professional term, and they said that this was actually a slang. But there I wanted to emphasize the secular state. Nuria and Semih, my two friends who are teachers, that were on hunger strike, and I took this video in Belgica, in Grand Place. So you can see when it comes to the rule of law, when it comes to human rights, for many years Turkey has been condemned internationally, but the international tax and trade treaties also are binding for the Turkish authorities, but they try to establish an empire of fear, and they try to silence people with accusations. They have unjust arrests and torture practices. This is how they try to promote their work. So I would like to emphasize here that I will continue to struggle with my court cases. I don't have any asylum or international refugee applications because the castles can be conquered from the inside and the struggle should be continued inside. In that sense, I think I am a precedent. I set a precedent and I'm a symbol in that sense. Thank you very much for listening to me. If you have any questions about any of what I've talked about, I would be very pleased to answer them.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, sir, for your presentation, your testimony. I'm sure that the colleague will have some questions. Judge Malin Verny.
Yes, thank you, Madam President. In the short notice we have been provided with, I can read that you face charges on inciting hatred on social media. Could you be more explicit on this?
This case dropped
but
against.
since we have not read this, could you now please orally tell us? And this is the first question. And the second one, could you tell us more detail on the situation of LGBT people in Turkey, if they are...
Yes,
yeah,
with pleasure.
Many thanks.
First of all, hate and craven is in number 216 and 217 in Turkish constitution. It depends of how you, it's not depends how you pronounce it, it depends how the judges understand it. So opinions are most important decisions today courts of the judges, not the real examples and evidences. It depends how they understand. Because I like sarcasm, I'm a designer and I like to play with words. Secondly, about the LGBT issue in Turkey, I am one of the most desperate victim actually, because I am the first five guard who started the Istanbul Pride in Istiklal Street 24 years ago. And we had right to have only 5 steps, then we have been taken into the blue minibus, our hairs are shaved, put in a sexual disease hospital, exhibit to the public. Since then, the movement has been grown, including our beautiful friend, we lost him last year, the second director of the 1968 British LGBT movement. He participated, us and the Pride and the LGBT rights started growing up. But since 1915, all the prides are banned, and same day of Hande Kader, which has been burned to death, a transsexual friend of ours, not prosecuted, but who murdered him. And also with water cannon, tear gases, they banned the LGBT issue. In late 70s, with the Nationalist Front government of Turkey, LGBT people has been targeted again. Before that, being LGBT was not a big issue in Turkey because our biggest star, the Art of Sun, was Zeki Müren. But after 80 military coup revolution, the target against LGBT people has grown. If you are a member of LGBT society, you have no rights, you have no defense, and doesn't matter Kurdish, Turkish, Alevitan, Sunni, whoever you belongs to, but if you are named after homosexual, you deserve a torture, you deserve a rape, which I have been faced in 1978 by 3 policemen, gun in my mouth in the blue minibus. And there is no way you can complain about it, because if you go to police station, you will face the same behavior against you. So I scream about the world about the LGBT rights in Turkey, but if you pro-Erdogan regime, doesn't matter you are transsexual or homosexuals, you can have your fasting time in Ramadan, holy month, in the table of the palace, but if you are pro-Erdogan, there is no issue. But if you criticize the Erdogan registration and regime about the human rights, about LGBT, about animal rights, which also very much related with the Opfer, which is they're cutting the animals live on the streets. So you are an enemy of the regime and you will be prosecuted for that. to have a sex change from man to woman is under the national insurance right now by the law, and you don't pay anything if you became a woman. But if you want to become a man, you have to send your expenses to the government. So the way they look to the humanity and homosexuality is actually against the human rights. There are many friends of us, because they are the others in the society, they cannot find enough support about their voices. And wherever they go on the world, actually LGBT issue doesn't seem like too much very political, but in the agenda of the planet Earth right now, if you watch like Switzerland this Sunday, the big referendum is coming for the marriage. And also when we watch the Orban in Hungary, we see what's going on. But Turkey is a lot of incredible, unacceptable guilt on the homosexual society in Turkey.
What does the Constitutional Code say about this attitude?
No,
this
you can be a
legislation?
homosexual by the Constitution. There is no law against it.
The jurisprudence of the Constitutional Code.
Yeah, you can be gay, no problem by the Constitution. Everybody has right to make their decisions and preferences on their sexuality. Because the Republic Constitution, who was set up in 1921, the first constitution, but since then, 1960 military revolution has changed it, became more free actually by that period. But with 1980 military coup, homosexuality was almost a crime. But then, with the registration of this pro-Erdogan Islamic regime, it's became more targeted because this regime likes to create enemies and use the enemy justice against everyone to create empire of a fear. Like we see in the Gülen Cemaat, we see in the Kurdish issue, we see in the Alevitan issue, we see on the LGBT issue. All the system is built up on the palace of Erdogan right now. And if you are pro-Erdogan, you have all the rights. But if you criticize and against them, you have no rights.
Thank you very much.
I thank you very much. So, my friend, maybe you asking question?
Yeah.
Are you calling me your friend?
No, no.
No, thank you. I'm
Sorry.
just joking. No need to apologize. You mentioned that you are, amongst other things, an actor. I assume you're a good actor. And you mentioned that you like to play with words. Now, did I understand you correctly that you said at the airport they tried to lynch you?
Kill me.
Well, you said lynch. So if I misunderstood, I apologize, then correct me. But if you did say lynch, are you playing with words? Or
No.
Do you mean
Can we
just,
show the
wait,
video, please?
no, wait. Just let me finish the question. Or do you mean lynch in the American Ku Klux Klan sense where they wanted to hang you up on a tree or the wing of the airplane or what?
It's not David Lynch story. It's the lynch actually, as you mentioned, it's the American system that justice cannot reach and the local people can prosecute people. But the lynch mob actually is very much seen a lot on the streets of Turkey against the Kurdish or homosexual or any simple reasons. But my issue, which I try to contact to ICOA and IATA about this issue, so they should make an investigation because Atatürk Airport is an international airport. And no one has right to lynch. There's the video of you can see with all the passengers. There is no right you can attempt to lynch people on the apron of an international airport.
I fully accept there is no right to do it, but I want to know what did they do to you or what did they attempt to you?
Yeah, it's there on the scene. Approximately 19 people pull me out of the staircase of the plane, and with hits and but even they stolen my watch during that lynch mob, and my teeth were broken. All my dresses was ripped off, and after that I was arrested and put in a cell.
But were those people, 19 people, state agents or just members
9
of
of
the
them was a policeman from the governorship, and 13 of them was the worker of the ground system of TGAs, which is partner of Turkish Airlines.
So did they assault you just, or do you know that they actually wanted to hang you, to kill you?
They wanted to kill me, actually. Another policeman from the other department has saved me and pulled me in a car out of this lynch mob, and I survived. But they really wanted to kill me. Before that, I have been attacked and kidnapped many times, but that was not the issue of whole my body. This time was out of the limits, and they transmitted live to the world this lynch mob in the same moments the world was watching it. And it was so much embarrassing about my reputation, profession, and my background. After all those things happened, I had to close my business in Istanbul, which is 60 years old fashion house. I'm the second generation. I had to sell all my properties, and I have to change my geography for living because the government cannot protect me anymore. I don't have a security on the street.
Before giving the floor to Justice Besset, Judge Balivernis would like to
further
put
question.
an additional question.
These people who tried to lynch you at the airport on the tarmac, how did they know that you were on the plane coming from Cyprus to Turkey?
Because of the Anadolu Agency.
They were over there.
Yeah. Because of the Anadolu Agency, which is the official government news agency, has broadcasted even my seat number and flight number on the plane, with 200 civil passengers were on the plane as well. They broadcasted and targeted me, and even those tweets who made me arrested, which doesn't belong to me, it's proved by the court, prepared on the 31st of December, a day before that deadly nightclub attack, describing the nightclub attack.
But again, on the same topic, a really last one from my side. I fully accept that they brutally assault you, but my question still remains, how did you know that they wanted to kill you? Did they shout, "We are now going to kill you," or what?
Yeah, they did. You can hear on Turkish. On the video, you can watch and hear that how they are planning, shouting, swearing to kill me, to destroy me, to send me to death. I survived.
I realize.
It looks like it.
Judge Bayens, you have the floor.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask you, and maybe I just misunderstood, but you mentioned at some point during your testimony that what reminded me was your mentioning that you like to play with words.
Yeah.
What exactly was the issue with your mention of stitches and seams?
Yeah, it's on Turkish, means dike dike, means with sewing and sewing. But Turkish court decided to understand it with, with fucking and fucking.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Thank you, Madam President. Have you entered Turkey since?
It's still going. 2 weeks ago, I was in my court hearings, 3 of them.
You were in Turkey?
No, I live in Cyprus, but I'm not escaping from the justice. I have to go there, show myself, and fight for it. I go to my hearings.
And you are not afraid that similar events
Well,
would happen to
Turkey
you?
is a tough country. They can even kidnap people from all around the world, and they can destroy and kill people. I cannot stop them if they want to do such a thing, actually, because fear is a big enemy, and fear turns the other fears into the weapons and create bigger enemies. Instead of escaping and hiding, go there, show them your face, look into their eyes, and defend yourself.
Now I will turn to Judge John Paces. Do you have any question? Do you have any question? Too late.
Thank you very much, Madam President.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So he doesn't have any question. So I think your testimony is over.
Thank you very
very
much.
much for being with us. Now over to the airport.
Thank you very
And
much.
thank
And
you
I'm
for
leaving
your-
this to the secretary to give you one
Yes,
copy.
if you can give that to the
Yeah.
registrar. Yes, thank you
you
very
very
much. Thank you very much. Now I will turn to Mr. Ercan Kurkut, who is the brother of Kemal Kurkut. And you are there physically. So I give you the floor, sir.
Öncelikle
First of all, I'd like to say hello to the dear members and the participants. My name is Ercan Kurkut. I'm the brother of Kemal Kurkut, who was killed by Turkish police officers during Nevruz in 2017. In 2016, I also had to leave Germany. I had to leave Turkey and go to Germany because I was sentenced for engaging in political activity, so I had to seek refuge in Germany. So first of all, I'll tell you about the event and then go into the details. In 2017, during Nevruz, in the morning hours, my brother Kemal was killed by Turkish police officers. Around 1 or 2 hours later, the governor of Diyarbakir said that a live bomb had been desactivated, had been killed while he was trying to enter the place. And then my other brother, Farhat, was also killed, and his remains were also taken to Malatya, and the funeral took place there. But of course, there are many details I have to tell you about here. So in the morning, after Kemal was killed, the reflex of the police officers of the state was to speak with the cameramen and the journalists and to take away all their cameras, to take away all the photographs these cameramen and the journalists had taken. And so it was easier for them to make the statements later on. It was easier for the state to say what had happened. And the state said that there had been a live bomb, there was going to be a suicide bomber, and that he had been killed. Later on, after we took the corpse of my brother Kemal, we came to Malatya. I'm very sorry. So this was actually Kemal's last journey, and it's still not over for us, actually. So once we arrived in Malatya, the state hospital asked us to establish Kemal's identity, and so my mother had to go from door to door, and she had to give her blood, and finally she did. And finally, 3 hours later, we were able to hand over they finally handed us over his corpse. And the corpse was washed in the morgue, and the municipality actually cut the water that came to the morgue. Later on, we asked for a coffin, but this coffin was refused. We also asked for a tent in which we could mourn, in which we could see the corpse, but they refused us as well. Years ago, we lost our father, Red, years ago, and we wanted to inhume my brother next to my father, but the municipality refused this as well. And one day after Nevruz, in the morning again, a journalist friend of ours who was able to foresee what was going to happen, and I'm really grateful to him, my whole family is grateful to him. And again, I would like to underline how important the free press is. So this friend of mine gave the photographs he's taken to the press and the camera footage, and we saw that what had happened there in Diyarbakir was not a live bomb, was not a suicide bombing, but a murder. And 7 months later, on the 14th of December, and afterwards, I forgot to say, the photographs were published, and 2 police officers were taken under custody. And the first was released the day after, and the second was released only 2 days after. And unfortunately, nothing else could be done about them. They were acquitted, and there were no other witnesses that we could question. On the 14th of December 2017, the court gave their decision, and they prepared an indictment. And this was accepted. And finally, our lawyers, with our lawyers, we asked for these 2 police officers to be arrested yet again, but the court refused this. So this court case continued for 3 years until 2020. And there was a single report, a single expert report that came to the court. And this confirmed the prosecutor's report. It said that actually these police officers had murdered my brother. But later on, the murderer and his lawyer refused this report, and the court accepted their refusal. So none of our applications were accepted, but the murderer's application, the murderer's demand, was immediately accepted. And this report was again taken back, and then it came back again. But unfortunately, the report was changed in taking into account the murderer's account. And the photographs, the videos that we gave to the court, most of the evidence, all of this evidence that we presented to the court were refused. And finally, the murderer was acquitted because of insufficient proof. But you can see this photo on the screen. If you were to show this photograph to a 5-year-old, he would be able to show you who the murderer was. But there's only a single person who's being judged in this court. And that's my journalist friend who gave these photographs and the footage to the court. There's no one else who's being judged here. Now I'd like to go into the details of the event. Now, in democratic states with rule of law, when there's an event such as this, you'll know it better than I do, of course. I'm not a lawyer. But when there's such an event, when the police officer comes to the place of then the police officer will try to collect all the evidence that there is. But the state actually tries to destroy all the evidence just so we can accept their story that there was a suicide bomber. So there was no questioning. The police officers who collected the evidence there, who confiscated the images, the videos, were not questioned. None of the police officers in Malatya were questioned. My addresses, my residences when I came back to Turkey were all raided because we were trying to do something about my brother's brother. Of course, this was a very difficult process for all of us, especially for my mother. All of us have been living with this violence, the state violence. We grew up under state violence. My other brother was thrown out of his job because of a decree. I was also tortured. The witnesses who you listen to here were tortured as well, and each time I listen to them, it's very difficult for me. My heart aches because we all lived through this. We've all been tortured. We've all been taken under custody. I was also in prison for several months. For 8 years, I lived an uncertain life, and I can't even hug my son anymore as I'd like to. My mother and us, we've all been going through hell. The state never tried to give us any psychological support. The state never presented its condolences for our deaths. No, it just continued applying pressure on us. In Kurdistan, we have a saying for the youngest person in the house. The youngest of the house is the happiness, the joy of the house, we say. And Kemal, my brother, was studying musicology. In Kemal's room, he would always be playing the violin. We'd always hear the piano music, violin sounds coming from his room. But they cut off our voice. They silenced us. They killed our enthusiasm. Nothing is as it used to be. And now, all we would want is for there to be no more new Kemals. We want there to be justice. Because this policy of impunity will lead to new murders. We keep saying this. We don't want new Kemals. We can't survive with this kind of pain. No mother, no family, no brother, no one here should have to live with such pain. No one should have to live under state pressure, under state violence. I apologize. This is all I have to say for now. I'm prepared to answer your questions, if any.
Kurkut, for this courageous testimony. And I know it's full of emotion for you, so thank you very much for being here with us and explaining what happened to your brother. We want to break silence. That's exactly the principle of this tribunal. So I will give the floor now to my colleague for some questions. Judge Malin Berni, are you going to start?
Yeah. One question on the circumstances surrounding the murder of your brother. I can read here that the murder happened during festivities. Is it okay? Is it right? So my question is, what could have caused the murder? Maybe some incident between the people during the festivities, or disorders among the people attending these festivities, which have degenerated into a killing.
So, we actually don't know anything about what happened before the murder. As you see in the photos, Kemal has a knife in his hand, but we don't know what happened before he was murdered. But we have a certain theory. Kemal, of course, was confronted with state violence before. A brother of his had been taken under custody, had been imprisoned, had been exiled. Another brother had been kicked out of his job, had been liquidated. So what happened for Kemal, the killings at the Ankara train station were very important. The terror event at Ankara was very important. A close friend of his had been killed, and this had destabilized him. And he had been severely traumatized by this, and after the 12th of October terror event in Ankara, he was followed psychologically. He had some treatment. And so we think that event on the 12th of October in Ankara was a huge event for him. So later on, maybe in Navruz, the police asked him to strip down. They wanted to search him. We think that my brother then panicked and that he was extremely angry. And so he found a knife and then went back towards the festivities. But actually, you can see in the photos, he's holding the knife against himself. So maybe he's saying, if you don't leave me alone, I'll kill myself. But this is what the witnesses there could say. The state isn't saying anything clear about this because the state destroyed all the evidence that was there at the moment. So we don't know what happened before. But this is our theory.
Much. May I give you the floor?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Kurkut. I am sure that all of these events were very traumatic. Oh, sorry. Thank you, Mr. Kurkut. I appreciate that these events were very traumatic. That is the correct photograph that you are referring to, the one that we have on screen. You know, it'll be terrible. It will be terrible if a guilty person, two murderers, are let off acquitted by a court because the court is dishonest, because of impunity, because the court is not independent. But on the other hand, it would also be terrible for a state where courts find people guilty of murder and sentence them heavily without sufficient proof. And generally, we require proof beyond reasonable doubt. So many murderers, let's just say killers, are acquitted because there is not proof beyond reasonable doubt. So I want to know a little bit more. I don't say that you are wrong at all, but before we can use this case, speaking for myself, before I, as a judge, can use this case as proof that there is impunity, I need to know a little bit more as to why these two people were acquitted. So I'm asking you, did the court give did the court give reasons for its finding, either orally or in writing? Or did they just say you're acquitted, go home? Did they give reasons?
the court said that there was insufficient evidence. But I'd like to add something here. There isn't only one murderer here.
To this one, let's just stick to this one. How did I'm really sorry, but I have to ask this. I was a judge in criminal courts for quite a few years. I sentenced several people to life imprisonment, and I was dead scared as a judge that I would send somebody to prison for life or for several years who is perhaps not guilty. So let's just focus on this, and please bear with me. It's not because I'm unsympathetic. I want to know if we can use this case as a concrete example. All right, the court said no, not sufficient proof. Did it say it just in one sentence, or did it give reasons? Because normally what a court would do is it would go to all the evidence, including the photograph. The court would say, well, on this picture it looks like this, but witness so-and-so said after the photograph something else happened. So did the court give proper reasons, either orally or in writing, for the conclusion that there is not sufficient proof?
So after the first report that was produced, here's what happened. Okay, I'm not going to call him a murderer anymore. It's quite difficult. No.
You are a relative, you are family of the victim, you have suffered a lot of pain. My question is, why did the court not call him a murderer? What was the explanation of the court as to there's no sufficient proof? So perhaps our systems are different. I'm not quite sure what you mean with reports, but was there a judgment? I'm not sure if our translations are correct. Was there a judgment where the court said, for the following reasons, I find this person not guilty of murder, and then say, the photograph shows this, witness A said this, witness B said this, witness C was a liar, and so on? Were there reasons like that given orally or in writing?
No, actually, they didn't bring any details to this. At the last hearing, they said that there was just insufficient evidence, and so they were acquitting the defendants. Because the murderer said that he shot the floor, that he aimed his bullets at the floor, at the ground. So actually, we don't know who killed Kemal, because all of the two policemen who were taken under custody said that they didn't shoot Kemal. Neither of them accept this. But there are certain policemen who did shoot, but we don't know who shot, who.
If you say there was some chaos, people shot, fired, one policeman said, I shot into the ground, that bullet could have ricocheted and killed the deceased. But for murder, you need the intention to kill. So maybe the police said it was an accident. Now, in my legal system, they would still be guilty of something, but not murder. So if you are correct that the court gave no proper reasons, then we are into another problem, perhaps even a more serious problem. Then we don't have legitimate courts in Turkey. That would fall under another topic here. Then we have courts who don't do their work. They just give judgments without giving reasons. I think in most jurisdictions, the only thing that a court can do to justify it, the court does not have an army. The only thing that a court can do for the public to trust it is to give good reasons. So if you say there were no reasons, that in itself is a human rights abuse and an atrocity. If their reasons were one of the several people could have killed him. We do not know who it was. Then it might not be so far-fetched that the specific accused was found not guilty. So let me leave it at that. Perhaps with the assistance of your rapporteurs, one could trace this case and see if there is somewhere a written judgment or a recorded judgment. Whether it would be in time for this tribunal, I do not know. But all I'm saying, speaking for myself, before I can make this specific case an example of impunity, I do need to know more about the reasons for the court's finding, or absence of reasons. Thank you very much. Sorry for the long speech.
No, and just concurring with that, because we have many cases at the European Court of Human Rights concerning Turkey, to somebody against Turkey, and finding that there is no proper reasoning of the court, and they were acquittal of many, many people who have an important, robust case law on that. And the court found at the end of the day a violation of Article 2, right to life, of Article 3, a prohibition of torture and inhuman and degrading treatment, independent of the situation. So not giving a reasoning, a proper reasoning to an acquittal of police forces or other agents, it in itself a violation of the right to life. That's why I really would like to concur with your question. It's so important. It's so important. The police cannot say no. We cannot say, well, it's an acquittal, without any reasoning, explaining on the face of the situation, of course, which are the reasons for this acquittal. So I will give the floor to you, George Manin-Verdi, because you asked.
Yes, I have a further question in relation to the one that our colleague posed. You say the two defendants, two soldiers or two military gendarmes, have been acquitted. This tribunal who acquitted the two defendants was a first instance tribunal, and if yes, did you try to apply to a second instance to have the tribunal to have a more motivated judgment? Or did you stop the procedure after the acquittal given by the first instance tribunal?
No, we continued the procedures, and now we're waiting for a decision that will come from the Court of Cassation. So the Court of Cassation will deliver its decision, and then we'll have exhausted all internal possibilities in Turkey, and then we'll go to another court. So the first report that we submitted, that the court submitted, said that the prosecutor's indictment was right. They justified it. So the state's motivation was based on not bringing any evidence, on not bringing any light onto this event. So from the moment this happened, the policemen entered the place where the Nevruz festivities were taking place and confiscated all cameras and cameras. And that's when we lost all confidence in the judiciary, because nothing happened about these police officers, nothing happened about the governorship in Malatya, nothing. There's not a single prosecution that's going on, and no one has been interrogated. And normally the court should have, the prosecutor should have gone into all of this, should have prosecuted all this, should have looked into all these evidence. So now we're waiting for the decision that will come from the Court of Cassation, but we've lost all confidence in the Turkish judiciary. And Kemal is not the last example. There were many other things, other people who were prosecuted before, who were killed before Kemal. Of course, Kemal was, the story of Kemal was well explained on the media, but you can look at what happened in Gezgin. There was Berkin, Ali Esmail, Mustafa Sarısülük, Ethem Sarısülük. They were also killed at Gezi. Just in the recent weeks, a child called Miras, I don't remember where in Turkey, but he was killed by a panzer. my Spencer's division, because the policemen in that region are so comfortable. They're so sure that they'll never be punished, that they can do anything they like. For them, it's really easy to kill people.
When we lose confidence in the judiciary, it's a real problem.
Thank you, Madam President. I had two questions, but the first of those I'll not put it because the case is before the cassation court, so I don't consider it appropriate. My second question is, was this photograph published before the trial at the first instance court and the appeal by any newspapers, social media? And was it public, let's say, and judges who decided on this case had the possibility as well to see it beside the proceedings?
Yes, this photo was published one day after Nevroz, one day after the event. Not only this photo, my dear journalist friend published around 8 or 9 photos, and the prosecutor also put Abdurrahman Gök, the photographer, on the witness stand, and they added these photographs in the file, in the case file. And there was also a video where we can hear the policemen talking amongst each other. When the policemen were standing in front of a police car, we can hear a policeman saying he didn't need to kill the guy. He says he didn't need to kill the guy. And so we can see the photographs here, and we gave them all to the prosecutor, but unfortunately, we weren't able to have a just hearing. And finally, the people were acquitted.
Judge Bayens, I give you the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. I just have two clarifying questions. The first one is, did you receive back the body of your brother? Did your family, was his body returned to the family?
Yes, we were able to get it, but as I said, they made us wait. It was a sort of torture that they made us submit to for 3 hours in the hospital. So my mother, first of all, had to go to a certain office to give her blood, and they said, no, it's not here, it's another office. So she had to go to another office, another office, another office. And a mother who's just lost her son had to go from door to door, and they were just playing games with her. They were playing around with her pain. And 3 hours later, we were finally able to take my brother's remains.
And then the other question is, you mentioned that the journalist that took and published the photos has been himself been subject to charges, and is he facing prosecution, and what charges were brought against him? If you could clarify, that would be.
Yes, my journalist friend Abdurrahman, right after the events, he started being pressurized by the police. His house was raided 2 or 3 times. His house was just nearly destroyed inside once they raided when he wasn't home. And he was taken under custody. And right now, they're asking for 20 years of imprisonment. But actually, I don't know what the indictment is exactly. But Abdurrahman Gök, after that event, was brought to the forefront. They started to bring him. They had other motivations about him.
We'll turn to Judge John Pache. Do you have any question?
President, if I may, thank you.
Yes.
Mr. Kurkut, I would like to ask you, this incident took place in Diyarbakir, right?
Evet.
Yes.
And it took place in 2017.
Evet,
Yes, in 2017.
Was there any similar incident in that town before, in other years before, or since? I want to have an idea of the kind of temperature in the town, generally speaking? Did you get my question?
Anladım.
Yes, I have. I understood your question. Yes, in the preceding years, during preceding Navroz festivities, of course, we always came under state pressure, but I'm not sure. Right now, I can't tell you if there were other murders, if other such events took place. But in Diyarbakir, every Navroz, there's always a big state pressure, police pressure. But whether there was murder or not, I really can't say right now. I don't know.
I'm not limiting myself to murder. I'm more looking at the general environment, whether it has been traditionally tense or there was frequent or unusual police presences. And was it just because of the festivity of Nowruz, or was it symptomatic of policy by the authorities, perhaps, which was aimed at maybe controlling or otherwise discouraging manifestations of the kind? But as I understand it, Nowruz is quite a traditional festival, isn't it?
Yes, Nowruz is the national festivity of the Kurdish people. It's not only in Turkey, it's also in northern Iraq, in Rojava, in Iran. It's a very important festivity. But in Turkey, every Nowruz festivity, it's not only in Diyarbakir, but generally, in all of the region of Kurdistan, there's a huge pressure during Nowruz. They try to prohibit Nowruz, they try to create sabotage about Nowruz. They always try to create obstacles surrounding our Nowruz festival. This has actually become a tradition. The state pressure and police pressure has become a matter of tradition around Nowruz because they do not want, they can't stand it that the Kurds have their own festivities.
Yes, so my final question in that case is, since we don't have or seem to have any record of similar serious killings taking place during Nowruz, was there any particular reason why on this particular date in 2017 the situation reached these serious limits? If the police have controlled these festivities before and since, how come they ended up killing a young person just like that? Did they shoot at people before, for example? Or were weapons used before? Or was this an exceptional situation on that particular day in 2017? Or was it normal, a normal kind of repression of sorts?
Under normal circumstances, I really don't know. I don't know. I have no information about this. Did the previous years, did they use arms? I really don't know. But generally, when the Kurds have hold certain events, whether it's Nowruz or other events, of course the police are armed. This is a normal thing to happen. If the Kurds have a certain event and the police are present, well, then they'll be armed because, of course, arms are there to frighten people and to incite them to be and to intimidate people.
Okay, thank you very much. I understand that it is a period of high confrontation, and in this particular case, that confrontation led to this kind of unjustifiable violence, if you like. Thank you very much. That's my impression.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you for your presence with us today and for the collaboration to the work of this tribunal. So thank you very much. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we are coming to an end of the session devoted to impunity. And now we realize impunity starts from the very beginning to the end, from the police, from the prosecutor, from the judiciary. So it's really, and at the end of the day, there is losing confidence in the justice, which is really a problematic situation in the rule of law country. We will now a little bit reorganize the schedule. May I just consult the registry at what time do you think that we can have the presentation of the Judicial Independence report? And he can do it right now, but alors I suggest, because in order to avoid losing time for you, for us, for all of us, I suggest that we have, as this morning, a comfort break, okay? A comfort break of 14 minutes or something like that. And then we will immediately have the report for the fifth topic, which is judicial independence and access to justice in Turkey by Mr. Luca Perilli. So now 15-minute comfort break, and then back here in this room to listen to the report. Okay? Attends, say it again. Say it.
So 3:30 would be, if 15 minutes, I mean 20 minutes
Yes,
from now?
3:30. 3:30. It's okay. It's okay. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot. Okay, so we resume our work, and welcome Mr. Perilli. Pardon. Perilli, I'm sorry, I'm really sorry for that. Thank you for your kindness to be here a little bit earlier. So now we will listen to a report on the independence of the judiciary and access to justice, because it's going together. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Ms. President of the Court, honorable judges, participants. Let me first of all thank the Turkey Tribunal for having given to me this opportunity to be a reporter for the Court. And I should also warmly thank the Association of Judges, the European Association of Judges, and its president, Jose Grea Matos, and another important European Association of Judges, MEDEL, and its president, Philippe Marques, who should be connected just now via internet, because they supported me in drafting the report, and the report has been finally endorsed by the two associations that represent thousands of judges in Europe. I'm a serving judge, and I've been independent expert of the European Union for almost 8 years. In between 2007 and 2015 in Turkey, I've been also independent expert of the Council of Europe for specific mission targeting the Constitutional Court. My expertise was in the context of the negotiation for the accession of the European Union, of Turkey to the European Union, and namely in the annual or almost annual peer review organized by the European Union in view of the annual progress report about Turkey. So I had the opportunity to visit Turkey many times. I had the opportunity to interview many people, from the stakeholders to the normal people from the civil society or from the association. And I drafted several reports which have been commented by the authorities in Turkey, by the Ministry of Justice, and then they have been published both by the European Union and still are visible in the website of the delegation of European Union in Turkey and by the Ministry of Justice. So some sources of my report have been collected directly by myself, but this was until 2015. So my last mission was in May 2015, and it was in Diyarbakir, exactly. We have just heard about Diyarbakir. For the first time was a different topic. It was visa liberalization, because at that time the negotiation had already been suspended because of the problem related to the rule of law in Turkey. But still there was an interest in pushing the visa liberalization process. And the mission was organized because 2 months before, in March 2015, the parliament passed a so-called security package. And it was a time of elections. There was a first round of election. Few weeks later, our visit in Diyarbakir, and there was also a bomb killing many people before the elections in Diyarbakir. And after that election, in June, it was not possible to form a political majority in Turkey, also because the pro-Kurdish party, the HDP, got unexpectedly, I think, for the political majority, a 13% of vote. And that changed the perspective of the political majority at that time. So a new round of election was organized in November. But what I can witness myself is that when we arrived in Diyarbakir in May 2015, the city was already disseminated by armored cars, was basically militarized. And it was also unexpected what happened to us, because for the first time it was an official mission organized by the European Commission in cooperation with the government of Turkey. There was not any delegation waiting for us at the airport of Diyarbakir. This is just to introduce the context and to see another point. So justice is in every report that has been brought in front of you, and all the witnesses that have come in front of you, they have a common request, which is a claim for justice, for a fair trial, for an independent tribunal. So justice embraces all the reports and all the witnesses that we have in this trial. However, we should not undervalue the issue of Kurds that we have listened to many times. And just a few minutes ago, this was not prepared for my presentation, but this testimony about the Newroz, the spring festivity of the Kurds, this is a usual occasion in which Kurds are arrested. I mean, they have occurred mass arrest for years in Turkey, and it is reported in many reports of NGOs and also official reports of institutions and organizations monitoring Turkey. And they have been arrested by the same legislation, which is the anti-terrorism legislation that after the coup d'etat has been used against the Gülenists, if they exist really, and the civil society. So what is happening now to the judges, the prosecutors, the teachers, the journalists, happened for a long time before in relation to the courts. This is exactly the same legislation. The propaganda that has been mentioned yesterday by Meltem Aktay, and the other criminal offenses. So I think that for the court would be important, it is not part of my report, but if you want, we can elaborate a bit later on. Important to know this framework, which is common to this period, which is the anti-terror law and the special anti-terror criminal law that date back in 80s, 83, the State Security Court were created in 83, and then they went also under the scrutiny of the Court of Human Rights in an important judgment, which is known as the name of the claimant, which is Inkal against Turkey. So after this long introduction, so my report is aimed at answering two questions. The first one is about the compliance of the independence of the judicial system with the international standards. So the first part of the report is about independence. And the second part is about access to justice and effective judicial protection. And Of course, if the reply to the first question, that there is no an independent judiciary, affects the second one, at least for what regards the effective judicial protection. However, also in the second part, is it possible to enlarge a bit our consideration? I will go rather quickly, if I can, through my report in order to give you the structure of the report, which is rather large and probably not sufficient to tackle all the relevant issues about justice in Turkey. And let me just try to highlight the time frame of the report. So in my consideration, I start from 2010, when important constitutional reforms were adopted in Turkey that reinforced the independence of the judiciary and the protection of fundamental rights. Turkey became a candidate country for the accession to European Union in 1999. It was December 1999. In October 2005, the negotiation for the accession started, and also the negotiation for the Chapter 23, which is judiciary fundamental rights, and my mission together with the opening of this chapter. Between 2007, 6 and 7 and 2012, it was a good period of reforms in Turkey. There was a significant change in the direction of the protection of fundamental rights. 4 different packages of judicial reforms have been passed by the parliament along those years. And the constitutional reforms of 2010 are the landing constitutional level of the reforms that I'm shortly mentioning to you. And especially the third package, the fourth package of judicial reforms adopted in 2013 was aimed at aligning the practice of judges and prosecutors to the case law of the Court of Human Rights that, as we have heard during the previous reports, has convicted many times Turkey because of violation of fundamental rights. However, unexpectedly, at least for the observer, in 2013, there was an irreversible turning point for the protection of human rights. In 2013, 2 events occurred. The first event was in May 2013. It has been mentioned also today, and is related to the so-called Gezi Park protest, a wave of civil demonstration began in Istanbul, initially to contest the urban development plan for the Gezi Park, a little park in the European part of Istanbul. And they were peaceful demonstrations that were repressed violently by the police. This is reported in official report also of the Commissioner of Human Rights of the Council of Europe. And the reaction of police triggered the reaction of the civil society. 2.5 million people took the street in that protest along the country. Looking for what? Claiming for what? For the respect of the fundamental rights, the freedom of expression, the freedom of press, the freedom of assembly that were put at risk by a government that was adopting progressively restriction to those rights. The consequence was what? The consequence was violence, in the sense that, according to this report of the Commissioner of Human Rights, the outcome was 6 people died, more than 8,000 demonstrators in 13 provinces had sought medical attention, with 63 serious injuries, 3 of which were in critical condition, more than 100 cases of head trauma, 11 persons losing an eye, and this was the reaction of the police, according to the report of the Commissioner of Human Rights. What is the further outcome of this situation? Impunity. In the sense we don't have a record of cases of punishment of the police after this event. We know that participants in the demonstration, or people who are supposed to be organizers of the demonstration, have been investigated for different title of crimes by the police and the prosecutors. The second important event is here on the screen, is December 2013. December 2013, there was an investigation in a corruption probe that involved the government directly. The sons of 3 members of the cabinet were arrested 4 ministers had to resign. Even the daughter of the president was under investigation. Many important representatives of business community. And this brought to the arrest of 3 sons of cabinet minister and 34 others. The reaction was violent in institutional terms. We will see later on what I mean about this reaction. But what is important to highlight is that already in July 2000 and in April 2017, there is this statement issued by the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe about the coup d'etat that occurred 3 years later on. The statement is the following, is important. Considering the scale of the operation undertaken, the Assembly is concerned that the state of emergency has been used not only to remove those involved in the coup from the state institution, but also to silence any critical voices and create a climate of fear among ordinary citizens, academics, independent non-government organizations, and the media, jeopardizing the foundation of a democratic society. This fear, especially among judges and prosecutors, was spread before July 2016. So the facts of July 2016, the reaction of the government is rooted in facts that occurred before. When we speak about international standards of independence, we can mention a lot of sources to justify the statement which are contained in the report. Let me just mention 2 decisions issued on one side by the Court of Human Rights and on the other side by the European Court of Justice. In the first one, the judicial independence is defined by the Court of Human Rights in the following way. We have to look at the manner of appointment of the members of the judiciary, the duration of the term of office, the existence of guarantees against and outside pressure, and the question whether the body presents an appearance of independence. In 2018, for the first time, the Court of Justice of European Union affirmed that the principle of rule of law is subject to the decision of the court. And it was this famous ruling about the Association of Portuguese Judges, in which, since the effective remedy is included in the Treaty of European Union, Article 19, the court said that judicial independence is an essential component of the right on an effective remedy in situations where rights and freedom are violated. Why I'm telling this? Because the aim of my report is to show that in Turkey, all principles related to standards of the independence collapsed after July 2016. And I'm referring here to the principle of external independence of the judiciary, the internal independence in its 4 features: individual independence from internal and external pressure, individual independence from internal hierarchies, the principle of natural judge, the free right of association, the appearance of impartiality, the autonomy and independence of the Council of Judges and Prosecutors, and the aspects highlighted in the decision of the Court of Human Rights, independence of the judiciary of the executive, the tenure of office, the manner of appointment of judges, and the appearance of independence, are the most problematic in this respect. Speaking about the reforms of 2010, very shortly, it was a significant constitutional change in the constitution that was approved by a referendum after that, and the referendum got a large majority of approval. And it regarded justice under 2 items. The first one was the Constitutional Court. The Constitutional Court were given a new power, which is an internal remedy, an individual application, similar to the one which is used in front of the Court of Human Rights for the protection of fundamental rights, and similar remedies exist in other European countries, for example, Germany or in Spain, recurso de amparo. So the aim was to create an internal effective remedy, also for preventing some cases to flow to the Court of Human Rights. I had the opportunity to coordinate a mission that published a report in 2014, a need assessment report for the Council of Europe that was also presented in front of the of the Court of Human Rights, the president of the court in Strasbourg. So this court, after September 2012, when the remedy started to become operational, proved to be very effective. I've mentioned in my report, I cannot go through the cases that are rather complicated, but just 3 cases here. Twitter ban, Balbai ruling, and Can Dündar and Erdogan case. Twitter ban, Twitter was closed by the government, and the social media had an important role in the Gezi protest. And the court, Constitutional Court, reopened Twitter, and the decision had been executed by the government, slammed by the government, but executed. Balbai was a very important secular journalist of Turkey that have been convicted to many years of detention, many years, and he was elected in the parliament. And again, in connection to the right to be a member of the parliament, he was made free by the Constitutional Court. In the case of Can Dündar and Ercan Gül, it even more complicated, because it happened in May 2015 that they published an information about a fact. The fact was that the Adana prosecution office stopped, searched, and seized a truck that was bringing arms allegedly to Syria, allegedly to ISIS. And this truck allegedly belonged to the secret services of Turkey. The prosecutor and the policemen were after that arrested, detained, and convicted. But also the journalists that simply conveyed the news to the general public had been arrested for many days until the Constitutional Court made them free. After that, Can Dündar has been convicted to a very long detention and now is a refugee in Europe. And the second important constitutional change related to the High Judicial Council. The High Judicial Council before 2010 was composed by 7 members appointed by the judicial hierarchies. And it was even physically located in the Ministry of Justice. So there was a clear confusion between judiciary and government up to that. This was a very important reform because according to this article of the Constitution, the 22 members, not 7, among 22 members, 15 members were judicial members elected by peers, and even 7 by the first instance judges. So this model is fully in compliance with the recommendation of the Council of Ministers of the Council of Europe, which recommends that at least the majority of judicial members, be judicial members, and that the judicial members are elected by peers. This brought pluralism in the Judicial Council, and judges started to feel their own independence because they were protected externally and internally by an independent Judicial Council. A proof of that I found during my mission in the behavior of some judges that used to resist to the decision of Yargitay to the Court of Cassation when the Court of Cassation quashed and sent back to them the decision. Another proof is the investigation of 2013, when the prosecutor started to investigate the government. And I mean, in my country, we have a long tradition of a public prosecutor investigating the government if there is a possible criminal offense. What was the reaction then? The reaction by the government immediate was that this amendment to the bylaw of the judicial police, according to which the police should report first to the superior and then to the prosecutor. We have never had in Turkey a functional judicial police depending on the prosecutor, which is a separate problem. However, this was about reporting. Many police officers were immediately transferred. Some were sacked by the government. And at the same time, since the High Judicial Council, majority of members, 13 of members, decided to issue a statement to protect, to defend the independence of prosecutors, there was also a reaction regarding the council. The reaction was what? That first of all, the parliament adopted a law that increased dramatically the control of the government over the council. I cannot elaborate further now because it's a bit complex. If we want, we can come back during the next session. Then there was this legislation adopted in March that abolished suddenly these special courts, which have a long story, very controversial story. This abolition was welcomed by the civil society because of the criticism that always accompanied this court. But which is the problem with this situation? That judges and prosecutors have been transferred in few days, even without being consulted. New judges and prosecutors have been appointed, even not being consulted. And the cases, the most important cases, also those cases related to the investigation against the government, passed to new judges and to new prosecutors. And this is not in compliance with the standard of independence, both the fact that the judges are moved without the consent and the fact that the standard of independence also covers the principle of the natural judge. In the following years, in between 2014 and 16, but especially in 2014, thousands of judges were forcibly moved to other destinations. As you can understand, it is not the same working as a judge in Ankara or in Diyarbakir and change your life in few days, as it happened during that period of time in Turkey. Then the arrest of judges started. So the detention of judges who were performing the work started before July 2016. Here are mentioned two cases that I cannot explain further. What was the accusation against the judges? The accusation was the same that we see today for the Kurds, for the Gülenists, also before. It was the anti-terror law. The anti-terror law impinges on the criminal code. Article 314 is in the criminal code. Article 220, which is another key provision, is in the criminal law. The anti-terror law that was adopted during the 90s increases the penalty, but the problem is in the criminal code, not in the anti-terror law. It increases the penalty by half. So, for example, in cases that have been mentioned also by the journalist yesterday, in case of membership in an armed organization, the maximum penalty is 15 years, but increased by half, it becomes 22.5 years. It was the case of the journalist convicted to 22.5 years to detention. But there is a provision which is very tricky. In Article 220, it says that it can be punished not only the membership in the organization, but also those who commit a criminal offense on behalf of the organization, or those who aid or abet the organization. So they are not members, but they are punished as they were members because the criminal offense is considered to be committed on behalf of the organization. Example, wearing a flag of the PKK in a demonstration, that can be a criminal offense against the law on demonstration on behalf of the criminal organization. Throwing a stone during the Navros festivity, firing a tire, that can be considered a criminal offense committed on behalf of an organization or aimed at aiming and abetting the organization. In only in 2018, according to the Commission of Human Rights of the Council of Europe, there have been more than 40,000 convictions because of the anti-terror law, more than 40,000 convictions. And in this famous case that has been recently terminated by the Grand Chamber of the Court of Human Rights regarding Selahattin Demirtas, who was the co-chair of the HD party, which is in prison since November 2016, the court has also established that this article of the criminal code, because this is not the anti-terror law, but this is a criminal code, an empty article. There is no content about the substance of the offense. So it's not possible for the people to understand what conduct is going to be criminalized by the prosecutors and the judge at the end of the trial. After July 2015, we have seen something probably never seen before in the world. I mean, such a number of judges and prosecutors arrested and dismissed. And the state of emergency was declared and for 2 years. That means emergency decrees issued by the government having the force of law. That brought also permanent changes to the legislation. And here, looking at the monitoring committee of the Council of Europe report, what happened? It happened that on 16th of July, the following day, the High Council of Judges and Prosecutors held an extraordinary meeting and decided to lay off 2,745 judges, remove 5 members of the council. 2 members of the Constitutional Court have been arrested immediately after, on 16 July. Arslan Altan was a member of the Venice Commission of the Council of Europe, and then the dismissal of members of the judiciary. Try to compile a list of 2,745 names. It takes days. It takes days. And this list was ready the day after the coup d'etat. And in the list, there were included also judges who had died before, some months before. They were already in this list. After the list, the arrest, this is Arslan Altan, this is another case of the Court of Human Rights that I had the opportunity to meet many times because it was my counterpart in this project of the Council of Europe. And then detention of thousands of judges. Some fled, some are refugees in Europe. There are some refugee judges also here, at least 2 or 3. I see hands raising here. That means that in Europe it has been recognized that judges are persecuted, because in order to get the refugee status, a person has to be persecuted by its own country. And by the way, if we look at the statistic of the European Asylum Support Office, Turkey is among the 10 countries with most application for asylum in the member states of European Union, country of origin. So that gives you the size of at least the alleged persecution in Turkey. Why judges were arrested? This is a list of questions that the prosecutor had in his or her hands, collected by Human Rights Watch. For example, which high school and private school did you go? Were you encouraged to vote for not to vote for the AKP during the election? Which candidates did you support in the High Council of Judges and Prosecutors election of 2014? This is a key issue, the elections of 2014. I cannot elaborate further, but it is a key point. And if you look at the consequences, former 5 members, current 5 members at the time of the Judicial Council had been detained, 8 previous members of the High Council, and 16, all of them, election candidates in the independent list which ran for the election of 2014. All of them have been detained after the coup d'etat of July 2016. Not only Gülenists, because this Václav Havel Prize, Murat Arslan, the president of Association of Judges, YARSA, that is association associated to the 2 most important associations of judges of Europe, he was arrested, probably because he was the president of the association, the same charge, terrorism, and then convicted to 10 years in jail. Currently, he's in jail in Turkey, and he is 2007 Václav Havel Human Rights winner, awarded by the Council of Europe. Then, ill treatment of judges. These are 2 judges who died in prison. Another judge, unfortunately, died some days ago in a camp in Germany, trying to flee from Turkey. And the association has been liquidated, dismissed. YARSA has been dismissed. The other association of judges, the Judges Union, has been dismissed. At the same time, another association of judges have been set up. In an official declaration, it has been admitted by the government, and now it is the Association of Judges which collects more than 10,000 judges in Turkey. It was set up in view of the election of 2014. In 2016, the European the network for the Council of the Judiciary suspended the High Council of Justice from the network because it does not comply with the rule of law rules of the network. This is probably the most important political step up to now, in the sense that on 25 April 2017, the Council of Europe, the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, has downgraded Turkey to the monitoring status. It's the first time, I think, in the history of the Council of Europe that a country is downgraded to a monitoring status because of the situation of the rule of law. The almost final step is 2007 constitutional reforms that then were approved by a very controversial referendum. If you remember, there was a very, very little majority and also allegation of irregularities. And the Council of Justice has been brought under the political control in the sense that 6 members are appointed by the president and the rest are appointed by the parliament. There are no members appointed by the peers anymore. But nevertheless, even after the state of emergency was closed, the High Judicial Council continued to transfer forcibly judges. In 2019, more than 4,000 judges have been forcibly transferred in Turkey, even though, as I know, in the strategy that they were preparing at that time, they wanted to comply with the recommendation of not transferring forcibly judges and prosecutors. And this is really the final step. Judges in July 2016 were around 40,500. 4,500 were dismissed, but now there are almost 20,000, so 10,000 judges recruited in few years. I've been one of the directors of the Italian School for the Judiciary. We trained the new judges, and for us it took at least 18 months to train decently some hundreds of judges. I cannot imagine how is it possible to train 10,000 of professional judges in 2-3 years and to have them ready for this trial. 10,000s of cases regarding criminal organizations. And very shortly on the part 2, because I don't want to bore you, honorable judges, about the effectiveness. So my conclusion about independence is not positive. You have the conclusion in the report. This affects also the effectiveness. However, we should also consider, and these are chapters of my report, the role of lawyers and human defenders, the right of defense, the fairness of the procedure, the fact that the ruling of the European Court of Human Rights are not enforced, and also the fragmentation and weakness of other public institutions responsible for protecting human rights. As regards the lawyers and human rights defenders, they paid a very high price. You have the number here. Let me just remember Ebru Timkit is the lady on the right side on the screen who died in the prison after 230 days into hunger strike. And according to friends, she only weighed only 30 kilograms when she was brought to the hospital together with the male colleague, Aita Şansal, at that time. And also the president, the chief and the director of Amnesty International. They've been arrested, detained, and then convicted. But the same destiny for many important NGOs in Turkey. And if you look at my report, I have devoted single chapters to this issue that I cannot resume today. So obstacles to the defense, especially in anti-terror cases, coming from law and practice. Lack of evidence supporting detention. This is a long story for Turkey, especially for pre-trial detention. The disruption of the right to a fair public trial, the misuse of pre-trial detention. And there are chapters also in relation to the fact that the decisions are not enforced. The rulings are not enforced. The ruling of the national courts are not enforced. Many people have been released and then rearrested immediately, especially journalists or people who are visible, also important cases. They have been immediately rearrested by another judge, by another prosecutor. And decision of the Constitutional Court, this decision that are mentioned here has not been enforced. And the decision of the Court of Human Rights are not enforced. We have, and I'm closing, 2 important cases decided recently by the Grand Chamber. There have been some decision that brought to the final decision by the Grand Chamber. One is Selahattin Demirtas, the co-chair of the HDP, and the other one is Osman Kavala, another person that I had the opportunity to meet as a representative of the civil society, a philanthropist. The first is in jail since November 2016, the second since November 2017. The second has been acquitted twice But another charge has come after the second acquittal. There is always a new charge. And they are still in detention. And despite of the fact that the Court of Human Rights, by a final decision, has ascertained that there has been violation of fundamental rights, Article 5, Article 18 of the Convention, they are still in detention. And this is the declaration issued by the Ministry of Interior after the Crown Chamber regarding Selahattin Demirtas. The European Court of Human Rights ruling, whatever the reason, is meaningless. And recently, in last week or 10 days ago, the Council of Europe, which is monitoring the process of enforcement of the decision of the Court of Human Rights, gave a final deadline, which is before the end of the year in the two cases, for the court, for Turkey to comply with the decision of the court. And also for this part, unfortunately, in my report, the conclusion to the question is rather negative. You will probably have the opportunity to read it. But I've not found any positive sign in the last years to have real hopes for the access to justice and effective judicial protection of fundamental rights. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Luca Perilli, for this excellent report. Very interesting, a little bit discouraging. So now we are going to put some questions to you by the judges. Judge Bianco, would you like to start?
Thank you, Madam President. And first of all, my thanks to Judge Perilli for the excellent report, the written one, and also for the presentation today. I have a few questions, and I would like to know your opinion, your insight about the situation in Turkey that, as we learned, you know quite well from your numerous visits in Turkey. The first question is, until 2013, you are saying that there were some positive reforms going on, and the position of the High Council of Justice was rather in conformity with European standards, especially with the Magna Carta of Judges and etc. How can it be explained that immediately after the Gezi protest and the corruption case, it was the High Council of Justice who changed its attitude and did not continue to behave in protecting transfers of judges, removal of judges, and etc., but abided immediately to the government? Was there a lack of kind of perception of independence, structural problems, lack of guarantees for the council? What was the reason behind this entire shift? Because then we see later the legislative changes and etc. So this is my first question. Do you want that I ask the other questions, or one by one?
As you wish.
So please, if you can.
Okay, if you don't mind, I will consult some notes. I have my reports here with me. So what happened after December 2013? It happened that the Minister of Justice resigned, and he was replaced by another Minister of Justice and by another Undersecretary. Why this is important? Because this reform, this constitutional reform, which was a good reform, was not perfect, I would say, in the sense that in the council, the government was represented by the minister and by the undersecretary. And the minister was the president of the council. And the undersecretary was the president of the first commission, the commission that was in charge with the appointment of judges and prosecutors. And therefore, when the new minister was appointed, the president changed and the undersecretary changed. And immediately after, it was in the first session that with the new minister, 15 January 2014, there was a new item to the agenda of the day that was reshuffling the composition of the first commission. That was the commission dealing with the appointment. So the president of the commission was the new undersecretary. So one was changed by the government. And then other two members were changed. These members are the Professor Bülent Çiçekli, that currently is in Europe. He fled after that. And Ahmet Berberoglu, that was elected in 2014. He got a lot of votes, but then it has been sentenced to 12 years and 9 months of detention. And this changed the majority of the chamber. What we can say, fear, a different orientation. But since 3 members of the chamber changed, from that point, the council started to transfer judges and prosecutors. But it is not only that, because as I said, there was a law enacted immediately after, in February 2014. It is the law number 6524. This law brought significant changes to the council. Those changes have been declared against the Constitution by the Constitutional Court on April 10, 2014. But the decision of the Constitutional Court have not retroactive effect. So what was done at that point. And it was this Constitutional Court that was operating in the interest of the protection of fundamental rights. They are different items, rather complicated. If you want, I can go through the different changes brought by the law. Very, very, very simply, I try to keep it simple. It was given to the Minister of Justice the power to appoint the President and the Vice President of the Inspection Board. One of the most important reforms made along the constitutional reforms was moving the Inspectorate Service from the Minister of Justice to the Judicial Council. Because let's say that this Inspectorate Service was perceived like a sort of chain between the government and the judges in the different regions of Turkey. I had the opportunity to participate in a conference regarding the Inspectorate Service in 2007. I have to tell you that all the representatives in that room, there were hundreds of people, they were only men. And also it was a bit astonishing for me looking that the members of the inspection service in a judiciary which is composed now probably for the majority by women were only men. It has been brought again under the control of the Minister of Justice. The Minister of Justice now is the one who performed the investigations about judges and prosecutors, disciplinary offenses, evaluation, because this is the inspection service. Further, it was given to the Minister of Justice the power to determine in what chamber the members would serve. So it was made legal. What happened informally before was transformed in a legal power by the legislation. The Minister of Justice could appoint the whole administrative staff of the Judicial Council, the reporters, the Deputy Secretary General, and the law established that the current members of the staff should terminate immediately their task. So the whole staff on what the members of the council relied for everything was then appointed by the Minister of Justice. And then it was even given to the Minister of Justice a power regarding the disciplinary investigation against the members of the council. And this law has been declared unconstitutional, but then the changing in the staff, in the chamber, already occurred. And this is the climate that brought to the election of October 2014.
Okay. Thank you very much. My second question is, somehow you hinted it when you referred to the fact that the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe has restored Turkey into the monitoring system in 2017. Considering your experience in Turkey, do you think there is room for international organizations, EU, Council of Europe, OSCE, or EU member states to take action, political or even procedural action, in relation to Turkey in order to improve the situation?
So thank you very much for the question. I mean, I'm a bit embarrassed in answering this question, being a judge. I mean, I'm not a politician, and for me it's difficult to reply. But I will try to give a legal answer, if possible. So when in 2005, first in 1999, Turkey got the candidate status to access European Union, and then in 2005, the negotiations were opened. You know that, you perfectly know, sorry for that, you know much better than me, that there is this unanimity rule. In order to open the negotiation, every single chapter, all the countries of European Union have to agree. But a precondition are the Copenhagen criteria that were adopted by the European Union, by the Council of European Union in Copenhagen in 1993. One of the criteria is rule of law. Therefore, there was the prospect at that time that rule of law would have been respected in order to support the process of negotiations. Now we see what? We see a country in which the rule of law has been dissolved along the years. There was a good progression. There were very good progress until 2013. In the last 7-8 years, it's a dissolution, even of what existed before. And in legal terms, my question to myself is, if we have a treaty, which is a legally binding instrument, the Treaty of Stabilization and Association, the pre-accession treaty, which are grounded on rule of law, and one of the parties seriously breaches the treaty, my question to myself is, what is the legal consequence of breaching a treaty? Because nowadays I don't see any consequence, because the negotiations are suspended but not terminated. And this is what I ask myself in terms of having been for a long time an expert of European Union investing in this field. And the second is, but I don't want to elaborate much on this, is about the Court of Human Rights. So the Court of Human Rights, because Turkey is a member of the Council of Europe since 1949. And in the Court of Human Rights has been invested by thousands of files coming from Turkey. And the first decision have been adopted after some years. And in some cases, the court said, according to its doctrine, that first, the internal remedy should be exhausted. The question that I have always made myself is, could be considered the Constitutional Court an internal remedy after that the Vice President and another judge were immediately arrested the day after the coup d'etat? Was still, this is, I don't have a clear answer, but this is something that I have asked myself for a long time. For the rest, I'm not in the position to reply to your question. I apologize for that.
And the answer to this question brings me to the following question. Is the Turkish Constitutional Court, you are referring to the arrest, I'm referring to something else, to the case of Mehmet Alpay versus Turkey, where the district court was able to avoid the enforcement of the decision of the Turkish Constitutional Court. So my question is, under these conditions, can we say that the appeal before the Turkish Constitutional Court is an effective remedy? Does it have any sense anymore? I mean, the reform of 2010.
Sorry, yes, I don't think I can answer this question. Okay. I think that it will be answered soon by the Court of Human Rights, and it will be much more credible than my reply today.
Now, in a way, it is in the concurring opinion of the court in March 2018 in that case, Alpay versus Turkey. So it obliged 6 judges to write a concurring opinion, which is rather unusual. And therefore, my last question. Do you think in this situation that Turkish judiciary is able to provide an effective remedy for cases of torture, abduction, killings, violation of press freedom, so basic guarantees, basic human rights guaranteed by the Convention or European Convention of Human Rights or other international documents? An overall assessment, please.
So thank you for this question. So how would it be possible, in principle, for a judge to ensure effective judicial protection? So he would need independence, internal and external, and professional capacity. These are the 2 main requirements for a judge to enforce the rights. And in these cases that you have mentioned, the counterpart is the state. And we have to admit, there are judges here, that in Turkey, there has always been this attitude of the judges to protect the state instead of the individual rights of the citizens. So the Kurdish situation is a clear example of that. I even think that some judges that have been detained and dismissed, they might be, in the past, use the same legislation to punish the Kurdish. So in order to do that against the state, you need a strong independence and a strong professional capacity. Regarding the independence, we have seen the overall situation of Turkey. It is not really encouraging. For what regards the professional capacity, please consider that in the system that they have in Turkey, the judges and prosecutors are recruited by the Ministry of Justice, even not by the Judicial Council. And after that, they have to undergo a initial judicial training by the Judicial Academy. In 2014, also the Judicial Academy was submitted to the control of the government. There is a report that I prepared in this issue. So we don't have an independent training in Turkey. Now we even wonder whether a training exists, because this number, 10,000 people that have been recruited in a short time, it's almost impossible to organize a proper training for them and to check the capacity and qualities. And there is a recent report by the Council of Europe about the fact that even from the institution, even from the court, there is a lot of skepticism about the capacity of the new judges to exercise justice in Turkey, and they have to deal with really complicated cases because the case load has been inflated by this investigation, tens and thousands of investigation, and the cases take years to be brought in front of the court. Still, some people who have been arrested in July 2016 are still waiting for trial after almost 5 years. So, considering the overall situation, imagining judges or prosecutors who have the independence and the capacity to run against the interest of the state is very hard to consider. But apart from that, there is also the legislation. As I said, I mean, there is a big problem with the legislation. For what regards, for example, freedom of expression, there is a provision in the anti-terror law which provides that in case of publication of statement of criminal organization, the person who publishes the statement can be punished. So this is a news. This is not a statement. It's a statement made by someone else, which is reported by the press. So the judge is even not requested to consider the context of the news, but only the fact that the news has been published. And if the prosecutor or the judge does not start an investigation or does not punish, if it is the legislation, which is the consequence for him or her? Let me make another example. There is an article in the Criminal Code, which is Article 100, Paragraph 3, which is called the so-called catalog crime, which is a list of criminal offenses. If one offense falls under the list, and basically all provision of the anti-terrorism law are included in the list, in order to issue a pre-trial detention order, it is not needed to a certain particular condition, whether there is a risk of fleeing, a risk of committing another offense, the risk of absconding the evidence. No, it is sufficient that the fact falls under the provision to issue a pre-trial detention order. And I had the opportunity to read many decisions, and basically I did not find a reasoning in that decision, but only the fact that the case falls under the umbrella of the catalog crime. What happens to the judge who does not issue a detention order in this situation? So I see the situation very hard to be recovered in the current conditions.
Yeah, okay, thank you very much. Now I'm turning to Judge John Percy. Have you any question?
Thank you, Madam President. I think my question has been partly answered. I seem to get the impression that the vicissitudes in this matter of independence of judiciary and access to justice is somehow running in tandem with the efforts for Turkey to join the European Union. And am I hallucinating, Mr. Justice, or is there any kind of influence of one set of developments on the other? Or is it just a purely domestic issue, this kind of disintegration of the rule of law, really?
So
Thank you.
the question is whether it is connected with the deterioration of the rule of law in Europe. This is the question, or what?
Almost. It is really linked to the process of Turkey's efforts to join the European Union and the lack of advancement therein.
Okay, this is a bit difficult question. What I can tell you is the following. I've followed many processes of negotiation for the accession to European Union. I followed Croatia until the very end when it entered European Union, Montenegro, Albania once or twice. And Turkey was the only country. First of all, the process in Turkey was very transparent, because it is the only country among the ones that I visited that published the report of the independent expert. Because it is up to the country which is visited to decide whether to make it public or not. So until 2013, 14, it was a very transparent process, and it was a real dialogue between European Union and Turkey. However, it was also the only country, maybe for its capacity to make researches and deep evaluation, that reacted to recommendation of the European Union, highlighting the deficiencies in European Union. For example, the High Judicial Council is not enough independent, okay, but there are countries in Europe which have not a Judicial Council. This is the reaction, for example, Germany or Austria. And every time it was a discussion of this kind. It was a transparent dialogue, but it's hardly to say if there was a real ownership of the reforms recommended by the European Union. There was a visible progress, but you don't know whether there was a proper ownership of the reforms. At a certain point, unfortunately, everything collapsed.
Thank you so much. That's most kind of you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. From the other side, Josh Bayens, would you like to put a question?
Thank you. I have a very specific question and then one that, it's a bit broader, I guess. But the first, the more specific question. If I understand correctly, most, if not all, of the dismissal of judges, actually charges and prosecutions against judges and prosecutors are based on the accusation of belonging to a terrorist organization. Is that correct, or are other
According
charges?
to my knowledge, for most of them is correct. This is my knowledge, but I'm here. I'm reading reports coming from Turkey, so it's not any visit to Turkey too.
Okay, no, thank you. Just wanted to see if there was another
This is
type of charge that was recurrent as well.
This is the FETO terrorist organization, the Gulenist terror organization. So the main accusation, not for everyone, is belonging. But sorry if I may add one point. So there are two parts that have to be considered. One is how to classify a terrorist organization, when we have a criminal organization or not, because this is the precondition in order to apply the anti-terrorism law. And secondly, we have the problem with the provision of the criminal code and the anti-terror law. Serious problem. Turkey has received recommendation along the years always to change this legislation. It has never been changed. Only along the fourth package of judicial reform in 2013, Some punishment have been reduced for people who were serving the punishment, but it did not bring it to the change of the legal framework. If we look at the first point, what is a terrorist organization? At least a condition, according to the international law, is that this organization exerts violence. And we have cases in Turkey that people have been punished for terrorism being member or supporter of organizations which were not violent. And secondly, recently, we have another issue, which is not, but tomorrow morning might be the first testimony will speak about this. The fact that some people are charged with these charges because they are close to the HDP party, which is a party legally represented in the parliament. Why I'm telling this? This is not my opinion. There is an excellent report of the UK Home Office of 2019 displaying what is happening to the people who are connected with the HDP. So it's not only the PKK, let's say the Öcalan reference movement, but now apparently, according to this report of the UK Home Office, it's also the HDP, which is a target for this kind of charge. For judges and prosecutors, mostly is a FETO terrorist organization.
Thank you. If I may, the other question is, you know, I was really struck by your and I can understand, I mean, the picture that is painted in your report, which is very, very good, I mean, I have only very good things to say about the quality of the report, is very bleak, you know, it's terribly pessimistic, no? And there's a phrase in particular that it really struck to me when you mentioned the change in 2013, and you speak about an irreversible turning point for the protection of human rights in Turkey. And you know, of course, there are many things that have happened that you cannot go back in time, like, you know, to return the situation to and you know, go back on the violations that you know, have been committed, or but can you elaborate a little bit more on that? Why the term irreversible?
Okay, of course, this is short time. I mean, I'm not thinking about the eternity, but this is, I mean, short or middle time provision. What I'm thinking about? I'm thinking about the fact that the judiciary has changed completely in Turkey. So when 4,500 people have been dismissed and they are detained or refugees, a new 10,000, which means half of the judiciary, are recruited. And it is not clear what process has been followed in the recruitment. According to some institutional observers, there has been also politicization in the recruitment of the new judges and prosecutors. I wonder when it will be possible for this judiciary to regain independence, credibility, professional capacity. Of course, it is possible. Everything is possible as long as we are alive. But the short-term perspective is not encouraging. It might be that if a new judicial council or an independent institution is set up, these judges and prosecutors start to think independently. Who knows? It might be possible. But the perspective is not encouraging, at least for the short time.
Much. And you will have the last say.
Yes, actually, it is indeed not a question, Judge. I am very appreciative of this very good, solid report. I have no questions about it. I see the topic is both judicial independence and access to justice, and then you actually seem to deal with the fate of lawyers, disappearances and people who died and so on under the access to justice part, which I think is fine. I see your report differs a little bit from the other ones that started with an executive summary. You took the more dramatic route of a prologue and then epilogue, and the epilogue you combined with a conclusion. All I can say is it is, speaking for myself, highly depressing. I agree with you that, as far as I know, and based on some countries in Africa, for example, where I come from, it can take very long for the judiciary and for a legal system to recover. However, it is possible. And there are even on the African continents, there are examples of vetting and so forth and so forth. But of course, for that, the political will is required, a sincere, honest, genuine desire to have an independent judiciary and a fair legal system is required. So I am pessimistic at this stage, but let's hope for the future. Speaking for myself, I am prima facie persuaded by you, prima facie only. I am fully persuaded by you and by your conclusions. However, should the Turkish government bring us arguments and information to the opposite, should the witnesses tomorrow have something else to say, and should my colleagues persuade me, for which I'm open, I may change my view, but at this stage, I am in agreement with you on your conclusions. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
So I think now we are at the end of the afternoon. Thank you very much again, Judge Perilli. Tomorrow we will a little bit reorganize the schedule because we're at the end and something can change, of course. So we'll start at 10 with witness 1, as usual, 10:30 witness 2, 11 witness 3, at 11:30 a small comfort break, we will call that in this way now. And then in 11:45 we will have crime against humanity. That's the last report by Professor Dr. Johan van der Lanot, who is the main organizer of this tribunal. So at the same time, summary of the question put forward to the tribunal, an extra question about crime against humanity, the question which is a general question surrounding the whole tribunal, and then lunch, of course, and at 2 p.m. We will have your video. Voilà, video by. Voilà, exactly. So and it will end, and so we will end the session of the tribunal on 3 p.m. And then the day after, Friday, at 3 p.m. will be the delivery of the opinion, according to the schedule you received. So no change for Friday so far. But so for tomorrow, that's the reorganization of the schedule. Alors, I wish you a very good evening. Thank you for being there. Thank you for your presence, and take some forces for tomorrow. Thank you very much.
All right, please.